I had a dream that someday I would build the finest organization in professional sports. There's a commitment to excellence to take a professional football team and give it a distinct characteristic that's different from all others. Just win. Play hard. Try not to make mistakes. But don't worry about mistakes because there's only one thing that counts. Just win. The flame that would burn brightest here is the will to win, is the will to win, is the will to win.
All right, Raider Nation, here he is, Coach Tom Flores, legendary Raider player, coach, and broadcaster. Thank you for coming on the Raider Homer channel, Coach. I'm honored to have you as a guest.
Hey, you're quite welcome. It's my pleasure. You know, it's a kind of a quiet time in this crazy world that we're living in right now with this virus so prevalent, and it's nice to talk to somebody outside of the house here.
Yeah. This quarantine is something. It's something else. You know, this is a major event. This is something that we'll probably never see again, and something that we haven't seen since like really 1918. So it's a major event.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to hear that you're hanging on in there because it's pretty scary. It is definitely scary.
Yeah, you got to be careful. You can't be stupid and foolish and thinking you're not gonna get anything, but because chances are if you get exposed, you're in trouble. So you might as well wait it out if you can. But I tell you, I feel sorry for a lot of people out there because a lot of them aren't going to rebound from this because of the effect it's having on our economy and some of the small businesses.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Once we get past the initial spread, we're gonna have to recover as a country as far as the economy. So we got a long road ahead of us. But hey, if we stick together and as you say, don't do stupid things, we can get through this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk football.
Yes, sir, Coach. So, the Raiders as an organization have produced some legendary coaches, players, and even broadcasters, as well as a legendary owner in Al Davis. Now, Al Davis, of course, went from assistant coach to head coach to commissioner of the AFL, eventually becoming the owner of the Raiders. Madden went from assistant coach to head coach to broadcaster and eventually the face of a popular football video game named after him that has become one of the best-selling video games ever. You blazed your own trail starting in 1960 as the team's first starting QB, and then you became an assistant coach, then head coach, GM, and eventually a broadcaster. The Raiders have made their mark on both inside and outside of the organization throughout the years. How does it make you feel being a part of such a rich history as a Raider?
You feel proud. You feel good. You feel honored to have shared the platform with those guys and the locker room and won and lost games with them in the trenches, and it's just fun. And it's fun to watch the growth of some of them. You know, I grew up in the organization and spent most of my career, 6 decades in professional football, and most of that with the Raiders. But in doing so, I got a chance to see players from different other teams, like Lenny Dawson when I was with the Chiefs, and his growth and into the Hall of Fame, broadcasting the Hall of Fame as well, and Bo Jackson, his development, and, as well as share the stage with Al Davis and John Madden and the cast of characters that we had with the Raiders.
Yeah, and it was quite a cast of characters, legendary. And in 1963, Al Davis came to the Raiders as head coach and turned the Raiders around, going 10-4, which was one of the greatest single-season turnarounds at the time. What was your first impression of Al Davis in 1963?
Well, I'd heard about him. When I was in college. I heard about him. He was assistant coach at USC, and some of the things I heard about him was that he was a tough, fierce competitor and very aggressive in some ways and very knowledgeable. But that's about it. I didn't hear much else until 1963 when he was hired by one of the general managers in Wayne Valley, and I met him. And the first meeting we had was very rewarding for me because he got on the board right away. We started talking football within the first half hour that we knew each other, and it was fun to watch what he had in mind, what was coming out of his mind, because it all had to do with the big play and passing and being a quarterback. It's a dream.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine what it would have been like to learn from Al Davis, But so what was his demeanor like as a coach?
Well, he was very intense, very he did all. Basically, he coached almost everything in those days. We only had five coaches, uh, included him as a head coach. So they had to coach just about everything. So he was on the board every single meeting we had, and especially with the then we had quarterback meetings at night during the week during the season. So he was very intense and knowledgeable and demanding, and but he demanding as he was right there working as hard, if not harder, with you, and, on your way to success.
All right. Well, in 1966, you had a great year, making the Pro Bowl and being named first team All Pro. This is the same year that Al becomes commissioner of the AFL and your last year with the Raiders. In 1967, you were playing for the Buffalo Bills, whose owner played a huge part in Raider history by loaning the Raiders money to stay in the AFL. What kind of owner was Ralph Wilson?
Ralph was a wonderful owner. We had in the American Football League, we had some terrific owners because they were more compassionate with the to the players, for the players. Ralph Wilson was one of the guys. He loved the league. He was the sole owner of the Bills, yet he was one of the biggest boosters of the entire league and helped the league stay in business. You're right, and keeping the Raiders from folding one year with a loan of money very quietly. Uh, he was very involved with his players, very involved in the city of Buffalo. I liked him. He and Lamar Hunt were the two of the great owners of the days of the early '60s, as they call themselves, the Foolish Club. Bud Adams was another one, and then Al eventually became a member of the Foolish Club.
So in 1969, you played with the Bills and the Chiefs, and this is the year you win your first Super Bowl, and that's after the Chiefs beat the Raiders in the AFL Championship game. What is the perception of the Raiders and Al Davis from the other sideline in those days?
Nothing but respect. Nothing but respect and you know intense rivalry, intense aggression, knowing that when you were playing them, it was a battle, and you never stop because they could win in the last seconds as well as we could win in the last seconds, and that's the way some of our games were. Uh, we respected Al Davis. I mean, Coach Stram. When I was with the Chiefs, I respected him, and it was in those days there were only 8 teams, most of the AFL. So it was like a family. We had very small crowds that grew and grew and grew, and then small squads that grew and grew and grew. It was kind of like a family branching out with cousins and nephews and uncles. And when you were traded from one team to another, it wasn't like you were going into another world. You were just going to another neighborhood, and that's why I think to this day the fans of the old AFL teams are so loyal.
That's awesome. Now, you have been described as a calm coach, quite opposite of John Madden. And Hank Stram has been described as calm. So, how much did Hank Stram have an influence on you overall as a coach?
Well, Hank was very, very organized, very disciplined, very classy in your presentation on and off the field, as far as how you looked, how you dressed. When we traveled, we wore sport coats and ties. We weren't allowed to have long hair or sideburns, mustaches, uh, and so you had to be respectful and look like a businessman and play. And when you think about it, when a player is dressed up as a businessman and looks good, he feels good, and he looks himself in the mirror, and it's going to help him. It's going to help his whole attitude. And I always wore a coat and tie when I was coaching, and whenever I traveled. So I think it was very important. But Hank was very organized as far as his practices. They were very, very precise, and his meetings and his treatment of the players was very good. So every coach that I've had, including all the way to high school, I've taken a little bit of them with me along my way as far as my philosophy is concerned.
That's cool. Uh, all right, so what is one thing that all NFL fans should know about the old AFL?
That we were a dream, started as a dream, and we woke up and became a football team and became a football league. And without us, football wouldn't be what it is today because we punched it in the mouth and made it better. And we got the NFL to take note, and they in return stepped it up a notch too. So the competition was tremendous, and that's what we helped make it what it is today.
After you retire as a player, you began your coaching career in Buffalo as an assistant in 1971. Your return to Oakland in 1972 is just the beginning of former Raider players returning to coach the Raiders. How did your return to Oakland unfold?
Well, I had when I went to Buffalo, it was just for a one season uh, uh, commitment, and so after the season was over, I returned to the Bay Area where I had my home and my family was, and I went in and I had coffee with Al Davis, and because he and I maintained a relationship, even though I was with Kansas City and with Buffalo as a player and even as an assistant coach. So he always said, when you're done, see, come back and we'll talk. So I did, and so it just so happened that they had an opening for a receiver, wide receiver, tight end coach, and eventually quarterbacks. But um, so he set up an interview with John Madden, and we talked and had lunch, and then he hired me. But they hired me, and I started working. And it was an easy transition because I never left the Raiders. I mean, I might have been gone physically, but I was always a Raider.
So, what was it like coaching Fred Biletnikoff and Cliff Branch as a wide receivers coach?
Well, coaching Fred was easy because Fred and I played together. I threw him his first pass when he was a rookie, his first touchdown, his first drop, his first everything, and then I came back and I was coaching him, so I knew him well. And Cliff Branch got there the same time I did, so he was a rookie along with me. So I had to teach him, and he was just a guy that could run like a deer, that had talent, and a track guy that could actually play football. And but we had to, if you can believe this, I had to teach him how to slow down. He was so fast because he was close to qualifying for the Olympics that year until he strained a hamstring. So I had to teach him that. I had to teach him some of the other things. He was a quick learner, and it took him a while. But his third year, he became an All-Pro, and the rest was history as far as I'm concerned. He should be in the Hall of Fame because of what he's done, not only on the field but in the postseason games. His record is still one of the best, and so it was fun. It was fun watching him grow, and until unfortunately we lost him earlier this. We lost him recently. He was always a dear friend, always a big smile.
By the time Super Bowl 11 rolls around, you've worked with Al Davis, Hank Strand, and now John Madden. What influences did John Madden have on you?
Well, John was a fierce competitor. John was very good on game days. He was on the sideline, as you know and noted earlier. He was a bear on the sideline because he was into the game, and it could be 0 degrees. He'd still have a short sleeve shirt on with a tie, that string tie he had, and but that was John, and he would motivate that way, and his players knew him. That's the way he coached, and he didn't change. He was consistent in that respect. And I was different. I was a quiet guy, so I had to keep the sanity in the press up in the coach's box, and sometimes I had to. John and I would commiserate and discuss some of the things in the quiet of the night. But we worked very well. I thought we worked very well together. I thought we complemented each other together, and I knew who the head coach was, and I respected that. And I, at some point, I'd hope that I would get a chance to be head coach, but I didn't think I'd be there. He kind of fooled me when he did, caught me by surprise when he retired. But I could tell he was wearing down at the end of his career. After 10 years, he had an ulcer, and he was worn out. He was tired. Time to step back, and that was the best move he could have made, because from there he went on to big time stardom.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And as I mentioned earlier, the Raiders have a list of players and coaches that went on to contribute to the game in one way or another. And in Super Bowl 11, Art Shell wins his first Super Bowl on his way to becoming the first black coach. And Gene Upshaw goes on to become president of the Players Association. So what kind of relationship did you have with Art and Gene?
Oh, I had a good one, because Gene I played against, and Art was there in those years too. And I got to know them a little bit during the off season. And then when I came back, 7 years I was assistant coach. I got to know those guys real well. And when I became head coach, it wasn't a big change for them, because I didn't change anything. We still continued to work similar to what we were doing before under John. But a little bit had to have my personality in it, and we still had the same philosophy, because this philosophy actually was Al Davis' philosophy, and so it was not a hard transition, and as I said, John and I worked well together, and I was happy because he finally got a chance. We were knocking on the door so many times. Finally, he got a chance to win his first Super Bowl, and I was proud to be part of it.
The Raiders had some great QBs in the 60s and 70s, starting with you, LaMonica and Blanda, Stabler and Plunkett, and you watched Stabler in his heyday with the Raiders. So what kind of advice did you give Ken Stabler in 1972 when he only started one game?
Well, he had, I got there in '72, and Kenny had already been there, and we opened the competition up. John opened the competition for the starting job, and Snake actually won the starting job that year. And we opened up, and his first game was horrendous, because he threw interceptions. Some of them were not his fault. Some tipped off the fingertips and or batted up in the air, and things just didn't go smoothly for him. So once again, we went back to LaMonica, and Daryl had a good year for us, and he helped helped us make the playoffs, and that was the Immaculate Reception year, and Snake almost won that coming off the bench in Pittsburgh. The following year, Snake legitimately won the starting job and kept it all year long. But Snake was fun. Snake was fun. I mean, Darryl was a good quarterback. He was the long ball type of guy. Snake was more of a gunslinger. Snake was fun on the field, off the field, sometimes too much off the field, but he was fun. and he didn't change from Monday through Sunday. He didn't change. He was Snake, loose, and a competitor like you've never seen before.
You won a Super Bowl with Stabler, and just 4 years later, you beat him in the playoffs on the way to your first Super Bowl as head coach. Did you speak with Ken after the Raiders beat the Oilers in the playoffs?
Well, not very much. Just congratulated us afterwards on the field, and but I didn't get. We didn't have a chance to. They took off. They got in the plane and flew back to Houston, and I didn't see him again until somewhere during the off season. But when we traded him, I did not want to trade him because he still had a lot of fire in his arm and his competitive spirit, and he wasn't done. But he kind of wanted to go. He wanted to make a change, and so we decided. We were actually down here in Palm Springs for league meetings. This is where I live now, and when we traded it, Kenny and I talked to him on the phone the day we traded him, and we discussed it, and it was a very personal conversation. But at the end of it, I wished him well and told him that that's what we were going to do.
In
And
1979, you became head coach of the Oakland Raiders. Did John Madden have any advice for you as you became head coach of the Oakland Raiders?
no, he really didn't. I interviewed with Al, and John just kind of relaxed and went off and spend some downtime. But I never did talk to him before any interviews, or after I got the job, other than just a socially here and there. But we never did talk about them. And we had talked a lot about X's and O's during that 7 years as an assistant coach. The late nights we worked and working and about what to do here, how to do it here, and so there wasn't. There didn't seem to be a lot to talk about because I was not going to change that much. I was coming into once again. I was not coming into a strange environment. I was coming into an environment that I had been in for 7 years, and with John. So there wasn't a lot to discuss as far as that is concerned. But we maintained a friendship over the years, and when you're involved in football, you don't have a lot of time to socialize. And then he got so darn busy with his television, that he was always on his bus going across the country and stopping little. I would have had a better chance to just stop at Hoboken, Kansas, or something, and wait in a coffee shop for him.
In 1980, you led the team to Super Bowl 15, its second Super Bowl in 4 years, with 14 new players. But the road to Super Bowl 15 wasn't easy as the Raiders came into the playoffs as a wild card team and had to stop Earl Campbell and the Oilers, the Browns in a close game, and the high flying offense of the Chargers. Now, the division game versus the Browns came down to the final drive when the Browns turned it over in the end zone to essentially end the game. And I got Ira Matthews' take on this question, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. What was going through your head when Cleveland threw the ball instead of kicking a field goal?
Well, let me preface that a little bit by saying when we came out at halftime, it was our choice, whether to receive or kick. So we had kicked off in the first half, and we had the first half because we lost the toss. So I came out in the second half, and I just felt that side of the field, I did not want to be there in the fourth quarter because this was such a tight game because it was going to be frozen. So I chose to defend rather than to receive, and they got the ball again. But and then you know that's what happened at the end of the game when they're driving. They got a good drive going, just like they had won many games. They called themselves the cardiac kids that year. They were driving down there, and it didn't surprise me that they went for the field goal because no, excuse me, it didn't just surprise me that they went for the pass because they had a kick blocked earlier going the same way. It was all ice, and they had a conventional kicker, and he couldn't get the ball off the ground. So the reason they threw that pass is they had gotten that far by doing those things. They were the cardiac kids. They'd throw the ball, 4th and 1, 4th and 10, a 3rd and 15. They late in the game to win the game. So the fact that Mike Davis made a great play, caught the ball, and Mike Davis was probably not the best hands in our defensive secondary, but that day it didn't matter. I don't think you could feel his hands anyway. It was so cold. It was, 39 below chill factor. My God, I don't know. I don't know how those guys stood it out there. I had so many clothes on. If I'd fallen down, I couldn't have got up. But anyway, Mike made the interception. It was $1 million interception, and we were halfway back to Oakland by the time we all thawed out and realized that we were going to the championship game again on the road, again against a team that really had a great offense, and that was Dan Fouts and the Chargers.
As I mentioned earlier, you saw Stabler come off the bench to have a stellar career. As head coach, you watched Jim Plunkett come off the bench and redeem his career. How confident were you that Jim could step right in and help lead us to the Super Bowl?
Well, I didn't know that. I liked Jim. I liked him in college, followed him because he was from the Bay Area, went to Stanford, and I watched him in New England. I coached against him my 1 year in Buffalo when he was a rookie, and then watch him just get beat up, and then come to the Niners. And I thought he was through. I really did. We played him in preseason the year we picked him up in '78. And I watched him warm up. I said, boy, there's something wrong with his arm. I thought his arm was shot. Well, when they let him go, Ron Wolf, there's another name that started with the Raiders, ended up in the Hall of Fame, Ron Wolf. He brought him over, and I worked him out, and John Madden and Al Davis and Ron Wolf watched. I wanted to see if he physically was able to do the things that we would want. And there was nothing wrong with him physically. I mean, his arm was still strong. He could still move. He never was a real nimble-footed guy, but he was a big game kind of guy. Made big plays in big games. Always did, all through college. And so I recommend we sign him. So we decided to sign him, and just made him third string. No pressure. He didn't have to play the rest of the year. And then in '79, he came back, and then that's where we made the trade. Pastor and he were the quarterbacks, and in '80, and before the '80 season, that's when we made the trade. And by all rights, Jim should have probably been the starter, but we traded a starter for a starter. And when Pastor went down, Jim came, and we were just struggling to stay alive. But Jim rose, like I said, he made big plays in big games, and he certainly did for us. He gave us incredible stability at a position that was a little shaky.
The Raiders have had so many great running backs over the years. You coached your fair share with Marcus and Bo, to name a couple. But Kenny King had a solid career and helped propel the Raiders into their second Super Bowl and contributed big time in Super Bowl 15. Talk about Kenny King and his contributions to the Raiders as a running back.
Well, we got Kenny. I didn't know that much about him, but Rod Wolf and Al Davis certainly did. And what he had great speed, explosion, and so he was a running back. He was an explosive running back, which he proved that year, and gave us. We were looking for somebody like that, and so he gave us that kind of a back out of the backfield. We were able to throw the ball to him out of the backfield, as we did in the Super Bowl 15 when we caught the ball and went 70 or whatever yards for a touchdown. So that he just and he was a good guy. He was a tough kid, and then when we drafted, it's interesting that when we drafted Marcus, he didn't feel threatened at all because he just moved over and he played some fullback for us. So it was Marcus and he in the backfield at the same time. Marcus' rookie year, and but Kenny King was just great explosive player.
So Rod Martin had a game for the ages in Super Bowl 15. Of course, Jim Plunkett got the MVP and he deserved it. But talk about Rod's performance in Super Bowl 15.
Well, there's no question in my mind they should have had a dual MVP. They did it with Dallas. They had two guys as MVPs because Jim had a great, almost a perfect day as a quarterback, and three interceptions in one game by one guy. That's huge.
Yeah.
And why can't you give one to him too as well? There's no rule to say you can't. So I thought whenever I introduce him, I always said, and I always introduce him as a defensive player of the game, MVP, which he should have been. And Rod was a guy that we took who was a skinny guy out of USC, talented, could run, but we cut him, and then we brought him back. We cut him again, brought him back, and then he finally made our team as a special team player, and then became the All Pro and Pro Bowl player that he was, and helped us win 2 Super Bowls.
Yeah, I mean, he also recovered a fumble on a kick return to save the Raiders from a turnover and a possible momentum shift. So, yeah, he had a great game.
Yeah, yeah. How can you have any better game than that? I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah. Shortly after Super Bowl 15, Art Shell retired as a player and in the 1989 season becomes the Raiders head coach. What kind of influence do you think you had on Art Shell's coaching approach?
Well, I think the organization, the practices, the coaches meetings. I tried to keep those disciplined and consistent so that the coaches would have they could plan their day and their night and their week and get the job done. And then Art knew his limitations, so he let some of the coaches coach, like the passing game. He knew the running game, but the passing game, but he got involved in that, but not as the one who designed it, but just to get involved because he had to approve everything, obviously. But he was a Raider. He was also a family guy. He was a Raider. He grew up as a player, assistant coach, never left the Raiders. Eventually he did after but he was at Kansas City for a short stint. But I'd like to think I had a lot of influence on him, but mainly because we were good friends and we knew how to win.
In 1982, the Raiders moved to LA, but the team practiced in Oakland and then traveled to LA to play home games. How did you hold the team together in such a chaotic year?
Well, that was a funny time. You think about it. We had 8 straight weeks with no football, and we were 2-0 at the time, and the season was going to be shorter. We knew that, but we were able to squeeze it in, 11 games, and I think it was 11 games. Anyway, so we didn't make a big deal out of it. The fact that we were in a strange town, not a strange town, but a different town, and we didn't spend any time there. We would fly in the night before and play the game, and then fly back to Oakland right after the game. So we were only there one night a week. But every game that we played that year was an away game, and that was a tough part. That was I got coach. I was coach of the year that year because of the incredible oddity of the season, and we made the playoffs, and we're by all rights we should have gone further than we did, but we did make the playoffs that year. We only lost one game during the season.
The very next year, the Raiders win their third Super Bowl in 3 years with you at the helm. Al Davis was quoted as saying that it was the greatest Raider team of all time. How did it make you feel to hear Al call your '83 team the best ever?
Well, it makes me feel good. I mean, especially on national television. I got to talk to the President Reagan that year after the game, and And we had, but we had a marvelous team. You look at the Pro Bowl, All Pros, Hall of Famers that we had. We had Mike Hayes. Mike Hayes kind of solidified our defense that year when we made the trade right at the end of the trade deadline and got him from New England. Then we had Mike Hayes and Lester Hayes, and we had Van McElroy, Mike Davis in the backfield, and three of them were Pro Bowl players that year. We had Ted Hendricks and Ron Martin, Pro Bowl players, Matt Millen, Pro Bowl player, linebacker. We had Howie Long, Greg Townsend. Uh, that was on defense. And then we had Ray Guy as a punter. We had Pluckett, Cliff Branch, Todd Christensen, uh, Marcus. Oh yeah, I forgot Marcus Out. so so we should have won. Those are great players.
Yeah, yeah, that was a great team. And as you were just talking about, there were a lot of great defenders on that team. And you did mention Greg Townsend, who became the Raiders' all-time sack leader, and that was his rookie year in 1983. Did you know right away that Greg was a great player?
Well, no, it's an interesting story there because at Long Beach, I had a friend when I was coaching at Long Beach City College, and we played junior college ball together at Fresno City College when we were both young teenagers. And he told me about it. He said, "Keep an eye on this guy." And he mentioned his name. I remembered Long Beach City College. He said he's really got a motor and blah blah blah. I told him this and that. So during the draft, we're getting ready for the draft, and Earl Leggett came in. He was our defensive line coach. He said, "Coach, can I show you somebody?" I said, "Yeah, it's okay." He said, "It's from Long Beach City." Oh yeah, I got to tell you about this guy that from Long Beach City wanted you to look at. I don't know what his name is. I said, "Well, this might be the guy." So sure enough, it was Greg Townsend, and we watched him on film, and said, "Wow, this guy, this guy, he's got all the moves." He was young, probably had no idea what he was doing, but he could make all those moves. And it just we got him, and his motor never stopped, never stopped. We saw that he was. He and Howie Long, their motors never stopped. If the guy ran into the locker room with a ball, they would chase him into the locker room. I'm sure they would.
Yeah. All right, so as we've been discussing, the Raiders have had a number of players and coaches move on and still contribute to the NFL. Players such as Willie Brown and Fred Biletnikoff became longtime coaches for the Raiders. Players like Matt Millen went on to be the Lions GM. Reggie McKenzie played for you in 1986 and also went on to become a GM for the Raiders, helping us build the 2016 team that broke our playoff drought. John Madden, Todd Christensen, and Howie Long, and yourself went on to broadcast. What is it about the Raiders coaches and players that drives them to continue to contribute to the NFL after their playing career or coaching career comes to an end?
I think it's just the love and passion for the game. That's the kind of players that we look for. And wherever I've been, when you have teams that have those types of players that respect the game, it makes your players better, makes your team better, makes your squad better, and then if that's what you choose as a career afterwards, you don't fall into it. You just kind of evolve into it, and they have done it, and they did a nice job. All of them have done a pretty good job with it.
Todd Christian talks about you trusting him, so much so that you called a play over the top to him in Super Bowl 18. It was incomplete, but he brings this up because it meant a lot to him that you trusted him. And trust is a word used a lot by your players when describing you. How much did being a player help your approach to coaching?
Oh, a lot, because I went right into from playing, and I really didn't feel I was ready to retire, but nobody seemed to want me anymore as a quarterback, so I got a chance to go into coaching, and I didn't know if I was going to like that or not, but I realized after a year or two that this was my passion, and if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. and I made one vow. I said, don't ever forget what it was like to be a player. Because some coaches, they go into coaching and forget what it's like to be a player, and all of a sudden they're the complete opposite as far as coaches are concerned. You said, know your players. You don't have to go home and have dinner with them, but you have to have their respect, and you have to be disciplined, and you're going to have to say no to them once in a while. And you got to realize that eventually, if you coach long enough, they're going to be gone, and you're not. And that's the hardest thing when you have a player like I. You know, I threw Fred Biletnikoff. This is an interesting story. I threw Fred Biletnikoff his first pass. I came back and coached him, and then when I became head coach, I cut him. That's all. That's how long a career he had, and that was a complete cycle. And it was time for him to retire, and so we let him go. And then, but he did eventually come back and coach with the Raiders. So you know, it's a huge business in a huge world, but a small little community of families. Every locker room is your family.
So the Marcus Allen and Al Davis dynamic has, left a lot of the Raider Nation scratching their head through the years. You can do your own research, Raider Nation, and find out what you can find out. But after all those years of Marcus Allen not being around the Raiders, how did it feel to see Marcus invited by Mark Davis to light Al's torch?
Well, I thought it was great. I think Marcus and Al clashed a little bit. It had nothing to do with football. I don't think it was just kind of a personality thing, and Marcus was huge in Los Angeles, and something got awry. I didn't get involved in that. He still was out. I didn't change the game plan any. Um, and when we drafted Bo Jackson, when Bo came, Marcus accepted that with class and dignity. He didn't like it a lot because he knew he was going to have to share some of the limelight, but he stepped over and played fullback. In fact, that 93-yard run on Monday Night Football, if you look carefully next time you see it, the guy at fullback was Marcus Allen.
Yeah.
With the lead block going off tackle to the left side of the line. And, that's the kind of guy Marcus was. He's a fierce competitor, a very classy guy. And he proved it when he went to Kansas City. He still had a lot of juice left and played well and got them, and they helped them get in the playoffs. So, but the thing, he and Al eventually, they eventually shook hands. And Al was, he was the kind of guy you don't ever want to cross him with anything, but he will forgive and never forget, but he will forgive. So they had mended their fences before Al passed away, and Mark always loved Marcus. Mark Davis always loved Marcus Allen anyway, and so I thought it was very big of both of them, and also Carroll Davis to ask Marcus to light the torch.
With all the people that we've talked about tonight and how they've contributed to not only the team but the NFL as well, I'd like to get your take on the job Mark Davis, who went from being taped up by the players in the locker room to now becoming the owner of the Raiders.
Well, that I was pleasantly surprised because I wasn't sure how that was going to work out because he had not spent any time as far as learning the ins and outs of the front office and the coaching part or the scouting part or any of that. But he was always a Raider, and he knew all the players. And he grew up there. I remember when I was playing, he was a little 8-year-old running around the field during practice. He'd pick up the ball, take off running with it. And we'd have to wait for him to bring it back. We were on a low budget in those days, but he knew what he knew what he didn't know, and that was very valuable. He admitted, he said, "I know what I don't know, but I'll hire the people to do it." And so that's what he's done. Reggie McKenzie did a really good job for him, I thought, and so did Jack Del Rio. And but he he always liked Gruden. And I think that was in the back of his mind. And when John became available, he leaped at the chance to bring him back. And unfortunately, the timing was bad for Jack Del Rio. But Mark was, that was the guy he wanted, and that was his choice. And we'll see what happens.
Now, you've seen a lot of great players, as we've been talking about. Jim Otto and Dave Dalby are two of them. My question to you is, how good is Rodney Hudson compared to Otto and Dave Dalby? Because in my mind, I think he's the best center that we've had since Jim Otto and Dave Dalby. What's your take on that?
Well, I agree with you there because he is a good center. He directs the line well. He leads them, and that's what a center has to do. He's a middle guy making all the calls, and he does an excellent job there. So they're pretty solid there because of him. I think the guy that would have been right in that class also, unfortunately, he got hurt as a young lineman was Don Mosbar. We drafted him out of USC, and he took over when Dalby retired, and he would have been there for 15 years had he not hurt his eye and had to retire because of it. So you're right. I think Hudson is the best since that was, Dalby and Otto and Dalby. That was almost a 30-year span there that the two of them were the centers. That's a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, talk about Jim Otto being such an Iron Man. I mean, wow, the stories that you read, playing injured, multiple knee surgeries afterward. I mean, Mr. Raider, right? One of the original Raiders,
Yeah,
as you say.
yeah. We started out together in Santa Cruz, California, and he was started out the first day of training camp. He was lined up with the linebackers, and then the next day he was with the centers. And he was he was not very heavy then. He was about 200, I don't know, 28 pounds, I think. And then he grew up from there. But he could snap he snapped the long ball, he snapped the short ball, ran down on special teams. He was involved in everything. Of course, we had small squads there, so you had to play more. You had to do more than just your position. And he never he you had to carry him off the field to get him off the field right until the very end. His last game was he limped on the field, made one block, and came off the field, and that was it. He retired after that. And he's still around. God bless. He's the toughest guy I've ever been around. He's the toughest guy. He's had more surgeries, but he is a tough man.
So, Carr and Mariota, how do you see this QB situation unfolding this year and into next year?
Well, I'm hoping it's going to be good. Mariota is, he's been a little humbled by the fact that he was, so highly drafted, and now all of a sudden he's gone. But he's going to a team that set a pretty good example of how that can. The very first guy taken in the draft in 1971 ended up taking us to the Super Bowl in '80 and '83. So there's an example right there, looking at him in the face to emulate if something happens to Carr. So he's maybe more comfortable back on the West Coast than he was in Tennessee. I don't know. I don't know the young man other than I thought he's a pretty classy guy, and I really thought he was really a good quarterback and a lot of talent.
So, the Raider Nation is kind of split when it comes to Derek Carr because, we all want to see the Raiders win. But, of course, Derek Carr has gone through coaching change, offensive coordinator change, and the such. Where does Derek Carr sit, as far as some of the greatest quarterbacks of all time for the Raiders?
Well, I think if you give him the protection, the offensive line, he was having a great year there when he broke his ankle a few years back, and he was on his way. They was being, he was being touted as MVP that year of the league, and then he never seemed to quite recover right away from that. But then also every year there was a new coordinator. Every year there was a different head coach. Maybe the consistency now will help. Plus the offensive line has got a lot better, and they got to because he can. You keep the game my feeling is if you keep the game tight and close, he can win it for you in the fourth quarter. He did that at Fresno State, and he's done that for the Raiders. But you got to protect any quarterback you have. They can't. They're not a lot of these Mahomes around that can throw with both hands and create magic on the field. Derek is very bright, and he loves the game. Loves his players, loves the game, and so we'll see what happens there. You can say all you want, he's got to do it. I mean, you can't just hope that he does. He's got to do it because he's got somebody right behind him now.
You had to deal with moving from city to city. So, what advice would you give John Gruden this year, moving from Oakland to Las Vegas?
Well, you don't change too much because first of all, you're not moving. You're going from one locker room to another locker room. It's just the locker rooms in a different city, and the atmosphere around that other locker room is a lot different than it is in little old Oakland, Alameda. Vegas is a different now. But John, he was in television for 10 years, and so he's seen all the hoopla and that kind of stuff. He's coached in the Super Bowl. He shouldn't have any trouble with that. I mean, that's football. Football is one thing, doesn't change. You got a new stadium. It's still the same size as the old stadium as far as the field is concerned. You still have to get in the end zone, and you still have to play the game the way it was meant. We got to basically, they're not doing anything wrong. They just got to do a better job of it.
I'm a huge Bo Jackson fan, so much so that I have a YouTube channel called BoJack Fan ATX 1980 dedicated to him. So naturally, I would love to hear what you had to say about Bo. You were still the Raiders head coach when Bo had one of the greatest Monday Night Football game performances ever versus Seattle. Coming into that game, you were 13-4 on Monday Night Football, but the team had lost 5 straight games to the Seahawks, and we were on a 7-game losing streak that season. Talk about how Bo changed the dynamic of the team when he was done playing baseball.
Well, Bo came in from the day he came in. You could tell he was something special. He was just, I mean, in practice when he turned the corner and turned on his speed. I mean, he got everybody's attention, and he was 230 pounds and the fastest guy on the team, and that included probably at that time Cliff Branch. They would have been close because Cliff was a world class speed himself, but Cliff was only 170 pounds. But Bo was, I mean, he was just an incredible athlete. The things that he could do. He could throw the ball. He could run. He could kick. He could block what he wanted to, what he had to. It was just amazing what he could do. But I only had him for a short time, and he kept going back to baseball. And I always thought about if you just played football, what you could do with it. Because he and Marcus at the same time, and I said, man, could we have fun with those two guys back? He changed the game, all right, and he proved it on Monday Night Football. He was big in big games too, as well. Just coming from Auburn, where they were highly competitive, running backs were real tough guys in a tough league, and I think he was the most explosive guy that I've ever seen. And I only had him for a short time.
I mean, that's saying a lot. The most I've ever seen when you say that, because you saw a lot of great players.
Yeah, I mean, I had some great. Marcus was the most complete running back I ever coached. He could do it all: run, block, throw, catch, you name it. He could do it. And there were other great players in there that are in the Hall of Fame right now that could do the same thing. So there's been a lot of great running backs, but as far as pure explosion, I didn't see anybody close to Bo, like in Bo's class.
Can you talk a little bit about the time that Bo hit that home run for you in Seattle when you went to see him play
Oh,
baseball?
yeah, I was up in Seattle my first year, and they were in town, and I knew George Brett from El. He grew up in El Segundo, I told I got my PR guy. I said, "Can you get us tickets?" Yeah. So we went down there. We went down there early so I could talk to Bo. So I'm talking to George, and I said, "Well, where's your roommate?" He was rooming with Bo at the time, and he said, "Oh, he's out there running his sprints today." And he used to run his sprints before the game, and then pretty soon somebody grabbed me and threw me up in the air, and it was Bo. I came down and we laughed and shared some moments. And Bo, I don't want to stay for the whole game. So if you're going to do anything, can you do it early? And sure, his first time up, he hit the top of the dome. They were playing inside. That ball, it went and hit the top of the dome. I said, "Well, there's my home run, so we can go now." That was amazing. It was amazing. The power that he had, the strength, the speed that he had. When he hit the first little slow grounder and ran it out uh, when he was at Kansas City for the Royals, everybody was in awe. They didn't realize he was that fast.
Yeah, he was something special. Must have been. Yeah, I can't imagine what it was like. But thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
Now, you and Madden had long coaching career stints with the Raiders. Now, Gruden is in his second stint with the Raiders, and you certainly know how important stability is to a football team. So, how did you feel when Gruden came back with the 10-year contract?
Well, I was surprised it was 10 years. I've never seen anything like a 10-year contract, but I was surprised, but maybe that's what it took to get him to come. It just seemed a little extreme to me, but you can always give. But I don't know how the contract is structured. You don't know. It could be so many years with options. That part has never been exposed. So, it's a different world now. The money is so different now that you have coordinators that are making $1 million, $2 million, as opposed to head coaches who are making $5 million now, and like in Gruden's case, $10 million a year. Finally the coaches are making big time money. That's pretty good. Players are making obscene money. That's pretty good too.
So, let's talk a little bit about broadcasting. You've mentioned Gruden, we've mentioned Madden, Christensen made it into broadcasting, Plunkett is on the Silver and Black show. Of course, Bill King was legendary, and you yourself did it for 21 years, mostly with Greg Papa. What appealed to you about broadcasting?
Well, broadcasting to me was like being in the game, and that's the way I approached it. I had my depth chart. I filled it out with little notes on players, and then I would watch game film of the team that we're going to play, and then I put myself in the huddle when I was trying to call the game. Put myself on the field, on the sideline, in the huddle, and go and tell people what actually was going on that maybe they weren't seeing, because radio is different than TV. You have to broadcast what the people are looking at, not necessarily what everything that's going on, but what they're looking at. That's what you talk about. Radio, you can talk about anything you want, including what goes on the bench, what goes on on the far side of the field. There's an altercation or stuff like that. So I enjoyed that part, and it kept me involved in the game. That was my, I guess, my antidote for not being able to play anymore or coach anymore. 21 years with Greg Papa, and I thought we had a great team, the two of us, and we both loved the Raiders. And I was sorry to see it end, but all things have to come to an end. I knew that was going to eventually come to an end.
Did you have a relationship with Bill King?
Oh yeah, I knew Bill a long time. I knew Bill real well, and he was a good friend of mine and dear friend of mine. It was shocking when he went in for that knee surgery and had got a blood clot, and we lost him. He was one of the great, if not the great, radio broadcasters.
Holy Toledo, man!
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love going back and listening to his calls. He was really, really great. And Greg too. Touchdown Raiders, but
Yeah.
Man, the Raiders, like I've said, we have just, as a team, an organization, the Raiders have just influenced the NFL so much throughout the years. It's a great it's a great thing to be a part of, and it's something that makes me as a fan proud.
Well, it's a fun group to be around, and I was reading an article. Not too much to write about right now, but they did have a feature on uniforms. They were talking about the Raider uniform. The Raider uniform hasn't changed since 1964, and why should it? It's not broken.
Don't fix it.
Everybody else tries, and it's still one of the classic uniforms in professional sports, and people identify with it.
Well, let's talk about something that is broken, and that's the Hall of Fame. There are a lot of players that were on your team that should be in the Hall of Fame: Cliff, Lester, Plunkett, Christensen, and of course yourselves. Yourself. So, my question to you is: do you think it has anything to do with the move to LA against the NFL wishes as to why though yourself and those players have not made it in?
I don't know. I really don't know. I do know that it's kind of disgusting, some of it, because there is an aura in that room against the Raiders, and some of these young writers and voters. It's more East Coast, at least more towards the East Coast, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what I've done wrong. I don't think I've done anything wrong. But it is what it is. I don't have any control over that, and I just think that the whole thing, the system is broken. It has to be fixed because they're out of touch with reality. I mean, there's a lot of players that should be in there. You mentioned some from years past. How about Jack Tatum? And we're just talking about Raiders. There's other players from other teams, but they can. The modern day voter seems not to be so anxious to just get the latest guy that qualifies 5 years out of into retirement. Just get him in right now, right now, right now. They don't have to go in right away. And how about some other guys that paid their dues in a different era when the game was a little different? You got to realize how the game was then as opposed to how the game was now. And you look at John Unitas, he made it. His percentage of pass completions was lifetime was 48, 49%. Well, nowadays that would not be accepted. But you got to say that he wasn't a great quarterback. Yeah, he was. He won big games and did it the hard way. So anyway, I don't know. I can't criticize because I'm still keeping my fingers crossed that in my lifetime I might be able to get that gold jacket.
Well, fingers crossed with you, Coach, because you deserve it.
Thank
Now,
you. Thank you.
you've had a great, great career, deserving of the Hall of Fame, as I just mentioned. But it all started in Sanger, California. Can you talk a little bit about what Sanger, California means to you?
Well, it's my hometown. I was raised in a little town outside of Sanger. I was raised on a farm actually, outside of Sanger, and it was a little schoolhouse. We had eight. We had no kindergarten, so I started the first grade when I was 5 years old, and we had eight grades and three teachers, and that's where I started my educational life. Granville Elementary School, and then I moved into the big city of Sanger. That at that time had about maybe 3,000 to 4,000 people, and spent my whole life there. Grew up there, went to junior high school, and all through college, returning to Sanger, and I loved the town. It was a small town. I knew everybody in town, all in the shops and everybody. They named the stadium after me, which I'm very proud of. I have a foundation there that I support to this day, and they just recently started their own sports hall of fame. So we had three guys that played in the National Football League from Sager, myself and Larry Barnes, a punter from UCLA, and I can't. The other guy escapes me, but So we've had our share of athletes come out of the valley, and a lot of great athletes came out of the valley, San Joaquin Valley, and we're very proud of it. And Sanger's always had a good football team. We've got a beautiful school, and it's just a very tight knit community.
So last thing, Coach, because I appreciate your time. Um, Talk a little bit about the Santa Maria Parade. Are you and how you're excited to go there on September 26th if everything works out?
Oh, I love Santa Maria. I like it up there. It's just a beautiful area, beautiful part of California, and I'm looking forward to going up there and maybe getting some of that tri-tip that they're so popular for, barbecued up there, and meeting a lot of people there. They're good old Raider rooters, and some of the Raider alumni are there, and those are fun times because when you meet the fans like that, it's not a pretentious type of a meeting or an event. It's just a friendly type of event where people are there because they have a mutual admiration, and they love the Raiders and the silver and black.
Amen to that. I cannot wait to go there, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person.
Well, I look forward to myself, and we'll have a Santa Maria cocktail, whatever that is. I just made that up.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for coming on the Raider Homer channel. Is there anything you'd like to say to the Raider Nation before I let you go?
No, just get ready. Get ready because the Raiders are coming to town, and Vegas is getting ready.
All right, cool. Well, thank you, Coach. I appreciate it.
All right, you got it. Talk to you.
All right, bye. Whoo! All right, Raider Nation. There you have it, Coach Tom Flores. Man, what a great story. The first Raider quarterback, an assistant coach, wins the Super Bowl with Madden in '76, wins 2 Super Bowls as head coach, goes on to be a broadcaster or a GM first and then a broadcaster. What a great story. What a great story. I hope you enjoyed the interview, and I appreciate everybody tuning in.